Hey everybody, it's John with Bath and Granite for Less. In this video we're going to discuss some different options for tiled shower pans. Your first option and most common is a mud pan. These do have their upsides. They can fit just about any shape or size that you want since they are custom. However, they're very labor intensive, as we'll find out in the next few slides. So how to pour a mud pan. Your first step is to prepare your substrate. You need to lay backer board down on the floor. You need to map out your layout of everything. You need to make sure everything is level and make sure everything is secured. Mud pans add a significant amount of weight to the floor, so you need to make sure everything's very secured and sturdy. If anything flexes as you add the weight, it can cause to cracking, which will lead to leaks later down the road. So once you've prepared everything, you're going to build and install the curb form. This step is, depending on your shape and size, there can be a lot of precise cutting and measuring. You then need to assemble everything. You need to make sure everything is square, you have a consistent thickness all the way around. You need to secure it very well to your substrate. Once everything is secure, you're going to pour the curb form. This can be fairly messy. One thing you need to worry about is the consistency of your mud as you mix it. You need to follow the manufacturer's instructions. If it is mixed too wet or too dry, it will not cure properly, which will lead to strength issues later on down the line. As you're pouring it into the form, you need to make sure there are no air bubbles. That will also decrease the strength. And one major side to mud pans is the drying time. There are several steps that require drying in between before you can move on to the next step. This specific one usually takes about 24 to 48 hours for that curb to fully cure. Once it dries, you're going to remove the wooden forms and move on to installing the drain. Installing the drain is usually a simple process, but it can be pretty difficult. You need to basically plan ahead and do all the pre-measuring of everything, because the drain needs to be installed at a very precise height. You're going to have the different thicknesses of your mud pan, of your tile, and the drain needs to fit perfectly in with all that. There's a lot of multiple parts. Some go above the mud, some go below the mud, some go above the membrane, some are below. So you just need to make sure you plan ahead with this step and get everything where it needs to be. Once the drain is installed, you're going to pour your first mud deck layer. The mud deck layer needs to gradually slope to that drain from your outside walls. You need to make sure there are no flat points or little divots. That is an area where water will pool and eventually leak through and cause mold issues. This is done using a special sand mix, and again, the consistency is fairly important with this. It should be similar to sandcastle sand, where it's kind of wet. You can make a ball out of it and it won't stick to your hands. Once you get all this, you must slope them down to the drain, to the lower portion where the weeping holes are. This will make it so any water that's trapped in between this layer and your membrane will still be able to drain out. You need to let this layer dry for roughly 24 hours and then move on to installing your membrane. These are usually larger cut to fit type membranes. You need to be very careful with them. Even a small pinhole can cause leaks. You need to cut them to fit. They should go about 6 to 12 inches above the base of the pan up your walls. And then you need to cut a small hole to reveal the drain that we installed a couple steps ago. You secure this to the pan using glue and secure it to the wall using glue and staples. A downside to the staples, obviously, is they add holes to your membrane, which will cause leaks, so you want to staple as high up as you possibly can. Once your membrane is installed, you're going to pour the main pan. Again, consistency with the mud is very important here for strength issues. You want to make sure there are no air bubbles for the same reason. This is going to add a lot of weight to your project. For large pans, you can add several hundred pounds. And you need to make sure you have the correct amount. This is a very fine step. This is where you're going to be sloping everything. So if you have too much, you're going to have too high of a slope. If you have too little, it's going to be too flat and you won't have good drainage. So you need to make sure you have the proper amount of mud, which usually means you're going to mix too much and have waste, or you're going to not mix enough and you're going to need to mix more and then you're back to the consistency issue. So once you pour everything, you're going to create the slope. You need to make sure there are absolutely no pools. That's just places where water is going to sit and not drain, and it will eventually seep through and cause mold issues. Everything needs to be the proper height. Usually you're going to go up your wall with the mud on the edges about 2.5 inches, and then your drain is going to be about 2 inches thick. So you're going to have about a 1/2 inch slope from your wall to your drain, but that can change depending on the size of your shower pan. Once you finish sloping your pan, you need to wait around 3 days for it to dry. So if you're keeping track, currently we're at about 5 days just in dry time. Once it dries, it's going to turn a very light gray color, and it's time to waterproof the pan. There are several different products you can use for this, most of which are very messy. It's basically a very thick paint, if you will. You need to make sure you have full coverage with this. Anything, even small pinholes is enough for water to get through. So you're going to be doing multiple layers. You're going to have to let each layer dry in between, which adds a lot of time to the project, and you're going to do so many layers that your final product will be roughly the thickness of a credit card. You need to do this to ensure that in your tiling step, which is next, you're not going to scratch through this waterproofing surface with the mortar trowel. You also need to go out on your floor with this waterproofing material roughly 6 to 12 inches, and up your wall 6 to 12 inches as well. In the picture on this slide, they tiled their wall before doing the pan, which is usually not what you do. So after the waterproofing dries completely, you're going to tile the pan. You need to make sure you dry fit everything. One thing that people don't think about is slope loss. It's very easy to lose a lot or all of your slope in this step. You're adding the mortar or the thin set to lay your tiles to the pan, and the consistency and thickness of that thin set needs to be very, consistent, so you don't lose that slope or cause any flat points. You need to be careful not to puncture your waterproofing layer with the trowel, and you need to make sure everything slopes down to your drain and your drain meets up perfectly with the tile as far as the height goes. So as you can see, the mud pans, it's a lot of labor, a lot of waiting, and a lot of measuring and thinking ahead. So it's very, I wouldn't say difficult, but it's definitely not an easy process. So what a lot of people will do instead of mud pan is something called the Prova shower system. The Prova shower system is a complete, easy to install waterproofing system for maintenance-free tiled showers. The main thing to pull out of that statement is complete, easy to install, and maintenance-free. As you can see in the picture, it has several different parts, so we're going to go over each of those real quickly. The main portion of the Prova system is the Prova tray. It comes in two different sizes, 48 by 48 and 60 by 32. The 60 inch by 32 inch has both center drain and offset drain orientations. A main upside to these pans is they can be trimmed if your walls are out of square or you have a custom shape or size. You can trim these down with a razor blade to fit exactly what you need. We have the Prova curb, which is made of the same material as the tray. They are trimmable, and they come in a preformed 4.5 inch by 6 inch by 48 inch size. They install in minutes with no need for any forms or any mud. We have the Prova drain, which is an all-inclusive drain assembly, comes with everything you'll need for that, and it's made to go flawlessly with the Prova tray setup. The grate is adjustable for any tile height, and it comes in several finishes including brushed nickel, chrome, and oil rub bronze, and it connects seamlessly with your current drain setup. We have our Prova joint tape, which is a fabric membrane. It's completely flexible, so it won't crack on you when you're trying to install it. It's mold and mildew proof, 100% waterproof, and installs in minutes. This is a waterproof fabric membrane that allows you to connect different parts of the shower to each other to make sure there's going to be no leakage there. One of the things it's going to connect is the Prova corners. These are that same fabric membrane They come in preformed, 100% seamless corners. They come in inside and outside orientation. So you'll put those in each of your corners and run that joint tape from the previous slide to connect them to each other. Often sold individually, we have the Prova mat, which is that same fabric membrane, but in a much larger size. Comes in a large roll. This is made for your walls. If you're going to be tiling your walls and you want that same membrane protection, you can get the Prova mat, and that will cover you there. So the Prova system is just a much easier way. There are other options other than pouring a mud pan. There are preformed pans, one of which is the Tile-Redi shower pan. These are a rigid construction and come in limited sizes. The rigid construction basically means that your walls must be perfectly square because they are poured to be with square walls. They cannot be cut. They do require a dry fit mortar bed, which adds to the weight and install time. And they require a special drain assembly and a special epoxy-based tile setter. You cannot lay your tiles onto this using a normal thin set. You have to use a special epoxy setter from the Tile-Redi company. These can also be fairly expensive. Here's a screenshot of that pan from Home Depot, $6.79 for a 48-inch by 48-inch Tile-Redi pan. And that does not include any membranes. Something similar to the Tile-Redi is called Finpan. It has the same rigid construction, limited sizes. Your walls must be square. It does also require a mortar bed. These are also very expensive. They do not include the membranes, and these also do not include the drain. Here's a quick screenshot from Home Depot. We have $630 for the 48 by 48 Finpan. So far the Prova system is our favorite. However, it does have some downsides. You have limited drain styles you can use, and you have limited tile sizes. With the Prova system, it is a sloped system, so you can use 1 inch or 2 inch by 2 inch tiles, anything much larger than 4 by 4, and they will crack. So the drain system, you can use linear drains with mud pans, but you can't with the Prova pans. Linear drains are nice because they are easier to form the slope instead of forming a slope all to one central point, which makes it more of a circular slope. You can just start at one end and go all the way to the other end with the linear drain systems, since they go along the entire length of your shower pan. You can use larger tiles since the slope is more gradual and not circular, and they offer a much more sleek design. Some other benefits of the linear drains: they have more layout options. You don't always have to have a shower door with these, since you can basically make a door with the drain, and any water that wants to get out will hit the drain instead. However, the downside to linear drains is they're very expensive. Here's a screenshot from Home Depot. We're at almost $2,000 for a 60-inch linear drain. So the final thing to think about is the warranties of all the different things we discussed. Mud pans usually have no warranty since you're doing them yourself. If you're not doing it yourself, they can have a contractor's warranty, but we all know how those go. And sometimes certain products, like say the waterproofing material, will have its own warranty, but if it fails, they're only going to give you a new bucket of waterproofing material. They're not going to cover the cost of redoing your entire shower. The Tile-Redi pans do come with a 3-year limited warranty. However, with every warranty claim, they will send out a company representative who's going to inspect your pan to see if it falls under their warranty standards. And if it does, all they do is give you a new pan. They're not going to cover any of the replacement costs for your shower. They just give you a new pan and let you go at it. The Prova shower system is definitely the winner as far as warranty goes. It has a 5-year limited warranty, which covers the original square foot cost of the damaged area. So if the pan, leaks within that 5 years and it breaks, they're going to cover any of your original cost to replace the broken portion. So if you have to pull out your pan to replace it, they're going to cover the tile you had to pull out as well at the original square foot cost. Another thing is it's a national company, so you get the backing of that national company's warranty and reputation as well. So there's a couple options. All in all, Prova is the easiest and definitely has the best warranty.